And grab these two guys. Drag them in. All right. So we'll create a new comp. Let's make it 1920 by 1080. And begin by placing my street scene in, which will fit nicely. And we'll grab this guy. Sort of crop him in like this. So he's a kind of a nice and easy one to mask. There's not a lot. The biggest thing here will be the difference in color tone, I think, between him and the background plate. But they're still pretty close. It's not too much to adjust. So I'm just going to kind of crop this down. So we're going to use a screen. It's not as bright as maybe used to seeing on a green screen, but so long as the color is even overall, it could be a gray background. So long as it's a nice even gray background with decent contrast and separation from the edges, it's going to work. Chroma, motion tracking, all of that rely on areas of contrast within the scene in order to do their work. I mean, they're all mechanical, digital tools. They need to have something to kind of grab a hold of. So contrast is kind of the big thing there. And if you've got an image, this has a lot of contrast in it, so this isn't going to be a problem. If you have an image without a lot of contrast, you can create a secondary plate where you adjust those contrast levels to sort of really kind of accentuate them. Use that to create your mask from, and then apply it to your original image. So we'll keep this in simple. Sort of center him up and select him. And the add-on, the particular plugin you use to do this is Key Light. So if I go to I can either find it under Effect, Keying, Key Light. There's Key Light, there's Key Cleaner, and Advanced Spill Suppressor. We're going to, recently they kind of combined these all into one, so that's what we're going to use. I'm just going to look for Key Light, and there's Key Light 1.2. We're going to use this one, Key Light plus Key Cleaner plus Advanced Spill. And it brings up this add-on. The first step of this process is really as simple as selecting our screen color. So the reason I use this one is that Key Cleaner and Advanced Spill Suppressor both kind of work in the background along with Key Light. So by using the combined one here, they're already doing something as I work with Key Light. I could select each of these separately because they actually will all isolate the green screen area by themselves, but we're going to just use Key Light in combination with these and let them do their kind of natural thing. So up under screen color, you just grab the eyedropper and really just pick an area as close to the subject matter as you can. So we'll grab that. And it knocks that all out by itself pretty easily and pretty quickly. If I turn this, actually there's not so much, it doesn't affect, so if we look at this by default, I've got it off. If I turn this back on, watch this area right in here around the eye. I turn that off. It's got kind of nice dense colors, but when I key it, it starts to pick up a little bit of noise and jitteriness. And that's because we're identifying that color range, but something within that color range still exists within our image, within that area. So we've got to correct that kind of stuff. By default, the view here is with an intermediate result. we're going to work towards final result, but I'm going to come up here to screen mat. If I select that, we're going to see why I got that color difference. Because these areas it's still identified as part of that screen color, and remember, black is transparent, so there's levels, any level of gray in between white and black will give you different levels of transparency. So by looking at the screen mat, I can see that it's picking some areas up inside of here. And if I look at the black area even, actually that's selection. I did this before, there was even kind of noisy out here. Kind of depends upon where you select within your green area. But you can get sort of splotching out in the black as well as within your masked white area. There's another setting that'll make this even a little more obvious, which is status. And you'll see that that makes that even more pronounced. So if there's some areas you can't see, which frequently happens, by taking a look at status, you can always sort of highlight those. I'm going to go back to screen mat to start with. And I'm just going to flip back and forth between that and status to make sure I get everything. So I'm going to skip a lot of these settings and go down here to the screen mat option. So I've got screen mat selected. And the ones I want to look at the most, all of these are useful. I'm going to look at clipping the black and clipping the white primarily. And there's a couple other settings, roll back, there's shrink and grow, which will allow me to, actually if I look at these first, if I zoom in here, if I shrink, I can shrink and grow my mask. So you see what happens whenever I move those either way. It just basically takes and shrinks and grows that. So if I grow it, switch back to intermediate, you'll see that I'm getting a lot of green around the outside of that. If I shrink this back, I can sort of choke the mat in a little bit. So shrink and grow is beneficial. I mean, by choking your mat just a little bit, you can usually get rid of a lot of, if you've got very minimal green fringe pixels, you can get rid of those a lot of times and not really affect the detail of your subject matter very much. It's a large shape. If I had finer details, that may not work quite as well. It's a matter of degrees, really. But you can shrink and grow that mat that way. Screen softness, D-spot black. We'll take a look at those if it comes up. So I'm going to switch back over to my screen mat so I can see the black and white. And we'll start with the white clip. And if it starts out at 100, if I lower that, you can see that gray starts to go away inside of the mask. And I can do the same thing by raising the black clip for the outside. The black was pretty good, it really doesn't need much. If you over adjust these, it'll affect the edge. So you just gotta kind of take them just as far as you need to go to get rid of the artifacts that you're looking to remove. If I switch back over to my status, kind of back to put that back just a little. So I can adjust the softness too of my mask a little bit. If I raise that way up, it'll blur it. Honestly, whenever I choked the matte down, it took away some of the blend. You know, there's never really, usually when compositing images, very seldom do you have a true, real hard edge. There's always some degree of feather in those. And introducing just a little bit helps you sort of blend those images together a little bit. So I'm just going to make that about like that. And take that, and we'll switch over to final result. Let's see what we get. So with an intermediate, I still got sort of a little bit of a haze within there. I could try choking that matte down some more. It'll probably start to alter, kind of alters the edge up here. Maybe bringing my softness back down might help that a little bit. It's not terrible. Keylight itself does a pretty nice job of getting the settings that it has. You can do a pretty decent job of getting all of that green kind of worked out of there. If we let's drop that, play that through. The effect is pretty decent. So it's pretty easy to get pretty good results. To get really excellent results takes a lot more work. But with this particular example, that's not bad. Does seem a little soft here, but maybe I slide the background. So he's on the back of a truck driving down the street, I guess. I don't know. But if we jump back in here, so if I turn off these other settings, like I said, kind of work along with Keylight, and they've been kind of working in the background with it. Advanced spill suppressor will is more beneficial for things like when you've got hair that you need to make sure you get all the color out of. It's using its standard mode right now. Suppression set to 100. If I drop its suppression to 0. Actually, I choked that in so much, it's probably not going to show us a lot of results now that I think about it. So let's bring this back up a little. See a little difference. So it's already set at 100, which is pretty much as high as it can go. We can switch our spill suppressor to ultra, which gives a lot more options. We're going to ignore key color because that's what we're doing up here with Keylight. But we can adjust. Let's see. This is on this particular image, desaturate. Some of these aren't having a whole lot of effect. What a lot of these do, desaturate. If we've got too much green in our fringe pixels, it'll actually desaturate that green, bring it a little closer in line with the background. I think maybe I just picked a bad photo to do it with. different images behave in different ways. So spill suppressor will help you eliminate the green from a lot of those fringes, like I said, especially in hair. Key cleaner will actually replace, and there's not a lot to replace in here, but it'll actually replace some of that green color with colors from within the background, or within the actual image from that area. So they just all work to sort of mask and hide that green. But Keylight itself does really a pretty fantastic job, all in all. Like I said, I mean, really kind of the point of combining multiple images is to make them look like they go together. So maybe we take our dog here and let's take a look at color correction. I'm actually going to close these up. Color correction. Take a look at curves. I'm kind of a slave to working with curves a little bit, but I can kind of pull some of those darks of the dog a little bit more in line. So he's not quite so bright and overbearing. Most, there's a lot of good tutorials that talk about even more complicated masking than this. There are bunches of different ways to go about it. We'll look at another one on next Monday, whenever we look at motion tracking, because that phone requires some different things. But, I mean, in all the tutorials you'll look at that talk about Chroma Key and these different ways of doing it, the one thing they always kind of tend to ignore is the fact that that's only one tool. You're generally not using just that to create an image. We need to, I mean, even just a simple adjustment of color within the dog went some distance to affecting those edge pixels. It's that overall bigger picture kind of a look. So that little adjustment to curves kind of made a difference. And maybe we want to toss an adjustment layer on top of it overall. You go back over here and grab a vignette. Which will kind of darken that edge a little bit. So that kind of helps draw everything together a little. And even you could add a bit of a grain effect, over top of it. Depends on the look you're going for. But if I toss, I'm just going to do noise. So if I toss some noise over top of it, overall, probably too much. But things like that all help to blend our images together. So it's more than just adjusting the key. It's looking at your image overall. So, take a look at that. I mean, like I said, Pexels has some decent green screen stuff. Play with it, work with it a little bit. That's, like I said, a very simple example. It's the color overall was very even on that. There are, I mean, there are other techniques as well. I'd shown you whenever I choked the mat. If my background had been, a lot of times you'll get a green screen that's very uneven, that's not a nice even color. Like the one on the dog was pretty good, pretty nice and pretty even. So if I create another one there, drop him back in there. Our green's nice and even. But a lot of times you'll get a green that's, I mean, based upon the studio it was shot in or the lighting that they use, it'll be a little darker at the bottom, a little heavier at the top. There are a bunch of kind of advanced techniques where you can actually use that key light, multiple instances of that key light. So you can drop one in, let's do one, grab that color and select our green. So if it's, what you'll see a lot of times is maybe it's brighter and close to your subject matter but darker to the edges. Try one where it's, and you've got to do all these steps multiple times, but where you select a darker edge and make your adjustments to your screen. Oops. Black. And then you can choke, actually grow, expand that mask a bit. Go back to intermediate result. We can grow that mask. So we did our initial mask, pretend, with a darker color out further, but then we can create another key light instance where we then just go in and select that lighter area even closer to our subject matter. So you kind of create, you take multiple key lights and stagger them. Mask your darker area with one, get it nice and cleaned up, expand it, and then take the lighter area that's right around your subject and do it separately, which actually is a two-step thing. Does a fairly decent job. And actually, by doing that, it pretty much eliminated all those green pixels around real close just by doing that, and I saved myself the trouble of getting into a lot of these other settings. So that's something to consider. There are techniques to doing this that are 4 and 5 stages where you actually mask the inside of your object with a pin path, track it to the movement as part of your initial mask, and then mask the outer edges separately and kind of blend those. So a bunch of different ways to do it. Whenever I need to do it, I always try to make sure that I pick imagery that is that is easier to do just by way of expediency and time more than anything else. Most of the time when I need to do it, I don't have huge budgets and that kind of stuff, so I don't want to spend hours upon hours working on it. But you know, depending on what you need to do, things with a lot of hair, you know, frizzy hair, that kind of thing require a lot more work. So, which would take more than I really have time to do today. So, but that at least gives you an idea how to simply set up a green screen mask. Like I said, blues work. You can even, you know, I mean, you can use the technique to mask a highlight area of a wall maybe, and even put a secondary image into that, you know, consider a dreamscape kind of a thing, maybe, I don't know. But just kind of knowing the technique, knowing how it works, then a lot of different creative ways you can take it from there. So, between the two, actually my vignette was a little harsh, but, so, I'll just save him. So that's basically how green screening works. On Monday of next week, we'll look at doing things that are more action-oriented, actually. Where we can very simply track objects, single point tracking, sort of track objects that way. Actually, it's shifted. Single point, 2-point tracking, which will allow us to place type other objects within the scene and track in perspective and rotation. Actually, this has multiple trackers in it, one for this one back here, one for this one up here. And perspective pin, which will help us track images to screens, posters, walls and alleyways. And then, I don't have it in here, but we'll also look at a 3D tracking mechanism that will assess, is a much more time-consuming thing just because of the processing time it takes, but it'll assess a scene, set multiple trackers all over the place, and then you select the trackers you want to map images on different objects. But, you know, like I said, it's as much about compositing as much about making objects look like they belong together in the same scene as anything. So, and we'll use multiple things to do that. So that'll be Monday. So Wednesday is just work in class, bring stuff to work. Encourage you to spend the time in here and work. I'll be here. If you need help with anything, I can answer questions. Can use the rest of the class to work. And then work here, work somewhere else. It's up to you. So, but tracking is what we'll do next week, and that kind of wraps up this